The Australian habit of ending a sentence with a rising inflection is becoming increasingly common in the UK, apparently, particularly among British youngsters. Research released today suggests could stop you getting a job or a pay rise. The trait is known as a high-rising terminal, but also referred to as Australian question intonation, because the rising tone makes a statement sound like a query. Well, to demonstrate, here are some Australian cricketers. You may remember them. They beat England quite recently.
I'd like to think that through my playing time I've achieved a whole lot more than that, though.
In the UK, there's always a chance of a bit of rain.
Obviously, it occurred that I had struck Joe Root in the face.
I'm proud of the boys the way we come out and fought our backsides off this Test match.
There might be one or two changes.
I'm responsible for my actions.
It's really important that we look forward to what we have ahead of us.
And this is how it might sound when the English do it in job interviews.
I think my drive and enthusiasm will be a great attribute for the company. My skills and experience mean I'll be able to hit the ground running.
I'm really good at dealing with people. This gives me a really good opportunity to further myself professionally.
Well, we've been joined now by Harry Key, who's a speech and confidence coach, and as you'll better hear where he comes from in just a moment. And Anne Frank, who's Chief Executive of the Chartered Management Institute, and you'll better hear where she comes from in a minute. A very good evening to you both. Harry Key, do you find it a bit of a burden being, having an Aussie accent like that goes up at the end?
Well, the research wasn't about the Australian accent. It was more about British people copying that Australian accent. But yes, I did find it a burden. It got in my way a little bit, so I did train myself out of it as much as I can.
So you've flattened it out a bit, have you?
Yes, focused on putting downward inflections wherever I could.
And I assume, just as a matter of course in Australia, growing up there, you'll end up with this slight uplift at the end of the sentence, this slightly quizzical, query-like phrasing.
Yes, it seems like a way of sort of softening what you're saying, so you don't sound too much like you're imposing your views on somebody else, which definitely has its place, but its place is probably not in job interviews or while asking for pay rises.
OK, well, let's ask Anne Frank, who deals with the job of hiring and firing, no doubt, and the general business of management. Does it get in the way?
Well, yes, unfortunately, it does get in the way because people tend to judge others by how they look, how they sound, and if you want to sound serious, you do not go up at the end.
Really? And Americans definitely don't do that either, then, Anne?
Well, probably not as much as Australians. But, how you speak, how you communicate is one of the most fundamental aspects of any interview process. So you have to take note.
Yes, I thought Anne just went slightly up at the end there. Well, check that out, Harry. What do you reckon? But tell me, have you noticed this sort of this inflection, this intonation, and the impact it has now you're based here in this country?
Definitely. I mean, it sounds like uncertainty, and that's because I think it does speak of uncertainty. It's if you notice yourself introducing yourself, and when you say your own name, there is a way of speaking that just it doesn't just sound different. You notice that you feel more certain when you speak that way, and it definitely comes across in those situations. So when you're going for a job interview, if you're telling somebody about your credentials, it's important to sound certain.
It's intriguing that youngsters appeared here, English youngsters apparently appear to be picking up this way of speaking, this intonation, and just building it into their own everyday speech.
Yes, it's funny. It almost seems like people are free to be as opinionated as they want and as certain as they want when they're online. But then when they're face-to-face, it's all sort of, I don't know, what do you think? Frightfully, awfully, I'm pleased and sorry.
Come in, please, Anne.
Yeah, I'm not sure that whether or not you go up at the end of the sentence reflects how uncertain you are. I think young people are doing this because they perceive it to be hip, much like the overuse of the word awesome, which, is probably just as annoying, if not more so, than going up at the end of a sentence. So I don't think it reflects uncertainty. What I do think, and your study showed this, is that how you're perceived by others will be that you are uncertain. So the best advice is, if you're going for an interview, prepare for it, prepare your answers, and avoid mumbling, use of jargon, or indeed going up at the end of a sentence.
And how big a part does the way you speak enter into a job interview, or the way you're perceived at work, and whether you might progress at work? Is it a big factor, or is it just one of many?
Absolutely, it's huge. I mean, body language and how you speak is actually weighted more heavily many times than the content of what you say, or indeed your CV. So it is, unfortunately, a huge aspect of influencing hiring decisions. And yet it shouldn't be, because it leads to people hiring in their own image, which, of course, is the exact opposite of what we want people to do. We want a diverse workforce.
But presumably, Harry, it's not just the intonation, but also maybe where you come from. As you'll know, there are a lot more regional accents in Britain than there are perhaps in Australia. And people here can take offence to people from, with a funny accent from another part of the country.
Yes, it's so varied. I always think the way to go about it is just to be able to make the choice deliberately. So it's not about whether something's correct or incorrect, which I think can be too easy to pigeonhole something and say, I heard from some guy that that's the wrong thing to do. But more about experimenting with your delivery so that you can play around with it and you can find a way that works for you, gets you the job, gets you the promotion, gets you whatever you're looking for.
What about those other points and the sort of other regional accents? Do they get in the way? Can they be a hindrance in your progress at work?
Well, of course they can, and that's true in every country, not just in Britain. Language, people's judgments about regional accents leading to, you come from, Bolton, you must be this way or that way. They, unfortunately, colour a lot of our impressions of people, and yet they shouldn't. And equally, you'll get people who are very proud of their simple roots and play up their accents as a reason why, they were able to be successful and they zigged when everybody zagged. So you can play it to your advantage, but that usually comes after you're successful.
Frank, Harry Key, very good of you to join in the debate in good humour, and good to see your accents haven't held you back at all.
Thank you.
Are you sure about that?
Thank you very much indeed. You're watching Sky News.